Hello, everybody. Salam Guapa Fizoh. My name is Blanjaloka. I'm the host today of this interview session or program that is called Pshehape. It's a Facebook uh, live session, and it's focused on entrepreneurship and businesses and startups. Today, I will be speaking with guests. So what we usually do is we're going to have every interview, every session, we have a guest, and the person would be speaking about the experience with when it comes to self-development first. How did the person develop the skills, and then focusing on the businesses, like what did you do exactly, what are you doing, and later on, the person can also give some advice for the youth, because the target group of this program is the Circassian youth. So let me welcome Jonty Yamisha. Jonty is a well-known person for the Circassian community worldwide. Jonty is very active in very different topics. He's well-known in the field of Adigabza, of course, teaching a lot of courses. He provided a lot of material on YouTube. I think if I'll be speaking about Jonty, I'll be speaking about for half an hour. So I'll give the chance for Jonty. First of all, welcome to Blada Subash, Jonty. Great. So today we will be, of course, speaking in English. Unfortunately, I guess also you agree, because of the target group of these sessions are youth, actually young people, and unfortunately, not yet. We didn't reach that situation where everyone speaks at Igabza and understands it, and that's why we are speaking English today. I would like to begin with, of course, as I said, a lot of people know you, but just for the ones that are still new, maybe for the community or young people that do not know you yet, if you can give me briefly some background information about yourself.
Sure. I'll try to be as brief as I can. I think a lot of people do know me as a Circassian language person. I'm very passionate about the Circassian language, but I don't speak very much about my background, about my career. I'm a U.S.-born Circassian. My mother and father came to the United States from Syria, from the Golan Heights. And I have been back to the Golan Heights many, many times. Not recently, but I have been back there. And like many of these Circassians from the Middle East in the United States, they came here as refugees. They came here as refugees following the 7-Day War. And growing up as a child, I can't say that we were ever poor, but money was always an issue. We had to be very careful about what we did and how we spent our money. And I decided at a young age that I wanted to never have to worry about that. So I was very motivated from a young age. I was able to get a full scholarship to go to one of the top 10 most elite, well-known colleges in the United States. In the United States, we have colleges and we have universities. Colleges are smaller. So I went to an elite school called Vassar College. At the time, it was ranked number 8 out of 5,000 colleges in the United States. And I was able to get nearly a full ride scholarship. So we did not have to pay very much. And the reason for that is I had really good grades in high school, and I scored a nearly perfect score on my college entrance examinations. So I did 4 years at Vassar College, and my specialty was political economy. So at that time, a lot older than many of your audiences, maybe a little bit older than I look. But there was still a thing called the Soviet Union, and it was collapsing. So a lot of my area of focus was on the rise of the European Union, and the EU did not exist at that time. It was called the EC. But the rising strategy and what economic policy and domestic policy and foreign policy would have to do as a result of all of those things. In my fourth year of college, I nearly dropped out. My parents said they would kill me if I did, so I didn't. And the reason is I started an internet agency because this was the dawn of the internet. And we did $1 million of revenue before I even graduated from college. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I can go make all this money. So I finished college. My senior year, I was writing my thesis half the time, and I was building websites and e-commerce stuff before there was e-commerce stuff half the time. And I eventually moved to Boston, and I started an internet agency, and we did well for ourselves. I sold that internet agency to a publicly traded internet agency at the time. The name of that company was called Organic Interactive. Now they're called Organic Online. They were backed by Omnicom International, and their sister companies were Razorfish and Agency.com. So worked for them, and really that was a transformative experience for me because it really elevated my experience as an entrepreneur, and it showed me what good looks like. That's a term that I use every day in my life now. I was able to see how large, successful organizations were able to structure themselves. During that time, I then decided that I wanted to get into a different line of business. It's a long story, but I got married to my first wife. I later got divorced, but I got married, and we ended up starting an insurance-oriented business. I then sold that business, and I used the proceeds to buy a house and to pay for business school. So I went to New York University. I earned my MBA with a double focus in finance and in marketing. And coming out of my MBA, I then went to go work in management consulting. So I worked for 5 years for a company called Marsh & McLennan Companies. And I rotated through all of their business units, starting in their management consulting group it used to be called Mercer Management Consulting. Now it's called Oliver Wyman. They're top 3 strategic consulting firms in the world. I was then recruited into work as a senior executive into Marsh, which is the largest operating entity within the MMC family of companies. And I rotated through their executive leadership program and effectively had a leadership role in almost every business within the MMC. MMC is a Fortune 250, probably a Fortune 200. At the time, they were about $13 billion of revenue worldwide.
Nice.
From there, I was then recruited into a company called FTI Consulting, which is the world's largest bankruptcy restructuring firm. And this was around 2008. So there was lots of bankruptcy restructuring to go around. And a lot of the work that I did there was around traditional bankruptcy restructuring, as well as operational improvement, performance improvement. Half the time it was restructuring debt. The other half of the time it was then putting a profit performance plan in place so that once the company exited the bankruptcy proceedings, they could demonstrate to the bankruptcy court that they would not go into bankruptcy again. So I did that for 5 years, working in their corporate finance group. And in all of this, my clients were always Fortune 500, Fortune 100 firms, multi-billion dollar, multinational firms. And whether I was working as a consultant or running a P&L, running operations, or working to improve a P&L or operations, it was just trial by fire. It was like the most amazing business training you can imagine, because I was exposed to some of the most intelligent, thoughtful business people that I've ever experienced in my career. I then left FTI.
Can I also ask a question? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can I also meanwhile ask some questions about what you've just said?
Yeah.
So, of course, you were first in Chicago, right? When you were studying at the University of Pillars. No, huh?
No, I was born in California, and we moved to New Jersey when I was 6. I lived in New Jersey for about 30 years. When I went to Vassar, it was in upstate New York. I then came back. I lived in Boston for a few years. I came back to New Jersey, when I attended New York University. I was commuting in from New Jersey. And this is actually the point in the story where about 8 years ago, or about 10 years ago, I left FTI Consulting and I ran my own boutique consulting firm for about 2 years. And 2 years in, a former client from FTI Consulting contacted me. And most of my clients at FTI, the businesses that I did all of this work for were Fortune 500, but the companies that hired us to do the work were typically private equity firms or hedge funds. So those were really the clients because they were paying the bills. They owned the debt that we were restructuring. One of them contacted me and said, we'd like you to work on one of our portfolio companies that is based in Chicago. That consulting work led into a full-time position. And they said, we'd like you to join the operating company as an executive. Our goal is to execute the performance improvement plan and then grow the company and sell the company. And that's when I moved to Chicago. And just very briefly on that, this is a little strange concept for a lot of people, but what private equity firms do, we all know this concept of buying a house, fixing it, and selling it. And you might do some cosmetics and flip it. You might structurally gut it. You might take it down to its foundation and completely rebuild it. That's effectively what private equity firms do. And that was always my long-term objective. So this private equity firm included me to move to Chicago with my family. And that was 8 years ago. We did exactly what we're supposed to do. We grew the company and we sold it to a publicly traded company. We all did well from that. And then I'm now on my second stint doing the same thing. Another private equity firm contacted me and said, hey, we know you have a reputation in this field. There's not a lot of people who know how to do this work. We have another insurance company we'd like to buy and sell. And if all goes well, we should have that transaction done by the end of Q1 of this year.
Great. I mean, of course, I read your information, your background information, but still, I'm like surprised about you have really, as you said, lots of more information about yourself than people know about you, because you're most of the time, like a Circassian, focused on the topic of IT Gabza. But that's one of the reasons actually why we interview people like you. So the community knows, like, hey, there are a lot of people that are doing lots of different things that you don't know about, because you are based in the US, of course. Maybe so of course Circassians of the USA know about your background, what you do, but that's really nice to show to the Circassian world what you are doing. I had a question also, because so you mentioned that these companies were approaching you, so you didn't really seek like the companies help, but they were like, they found you on what, LinkedIn or maybe
No,
network?
no. So this is a really good point. By the way, the reason I am here right now in a Starbucks in downtown Chicago is because I finished a business meeting that ran long, and I'm doing this here, right? So people ask me a lot, how do I do networking? How do I build my reputation? And I'm going to give you the least impressive answer, but it's the most true one that I know of. And I know many successful business people, and they would all agree with this. Go work for a good firm. Go work for the smartest people you can find. Do what you say what you do, show up on time, be kind, add value, and you will build a reputation. And once you build that reputation, you don't have to go to networking events. You don't have to be on people's radar. You will be on their radar, and they will proactively come and find you. So in my case, I was fortunate enough to go to very elite schools, and that did help. But my first job, I said, I want to go work I always wanted to work for the number one or number two company in its field. So when I went to go work for Marsh & McLennan, they're the world's largest risk advisory firm. They're the world's largest global reinsurance firm. They're the number two, at the time, they were the number two strategic management consulting firm. So I went to go work there, and I was surrounded by brilliant people. And I did what I said. I said what I did. I showed up on time. I was kind. I added value. And senior executives in that firm slowly started to recruit me and recruit me and recruit me. And everything I just described, that's how it all happened. So this was never LinkedIn. This was always people who knew me or people who knew people who knew me. In Len, much in the same way, you didn't find me on LinkedIn, right? We're both Circassians. In the Circassian sphere, I do what I say what I do, I try to add value. And so, you just kind of knew who I was because of that. It's the same thing in my career as well.
Great. I mean, if you look at a lot of, I personally follow a lot of different people, like when it comes to big businessmen. You have YouTube channels that are focused on entrepreneurship as well. I see some of them say like, it's important to study, but it's not the most important thing. What do you think? What Jonty think? What do you think about this topic? Like, is it really necessary to study first and then pursue your dream and go, start on your own, or is it better to, of course, as I believe that you would say that no, it's better to have a good educational background and start, as you said, a good firm, working at a good firm company, and then go on.
Sure. First of all, I think everyone's different. I don't think that this is a one size fits all answer. I think that watching and listening and talking to there are many different paths to success. And so getting input from lots of people is the best approach here. And I'm reminded of a famous quote, which I'm probably going to misquote a little bit, from Mark Twain, who said, "I've never allowed my schooling to get in the way of my education." So, Ryan, when you ask me, is it better to do this or this? First of all, I think it's very, very important to distinguish schooling from education. I've met many people who have been very successful in school, but have failed to get a true education. And I've met many, many very successful people who never went to college, some of whom dropped out of high school, but they were able to work and get mentored under very, very smart people. And they were smart people themselves. So I think that you need a combination of theory and practice. You can go and get an MBA and understand all of the theory, but until you have a terrible employee who's doing destructive things and you don't have enough revenue to cover your payroll, you're not going to know what reality is. But at the same time, if all you've ever done is run a small business and you've never had the theoretical grounding of what a P&L looks like, how to run operations, how to do financial capital modeling, you're always going to be constrained because there are tools out there. There are frameworks out there that will allow you to think about how to take a small business and make it bigger. And just on this last point, I say this all the time. It's ironic that I happen to be here in Starbucks. There's nothing that separates Starbucks, a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company, from some cafe down the street. They both do the same thing, except Starbucks used financial capital, human resources, strategy, operations management, real estate management, demographic trend identification to select where they're going to put their stores in place. Operationally, they do the same thing, but one of these companies was able to use bigger, better tools in order to become a multi-billion-dollar company. And if I said to somebody 20 years ago, I'm going to become a billionaire selling coffee on the street, I would have been laughed at, except here we are. So understanding what those tools and instruments are, and then also being around really smart people who will tell you, you can be a billionaire doing almost anything. Not that I'm a billionaire, and I don't think I'll ever become a billionaire, but there's no business you can think of that's not capable of generating millions or even hundreds of millions of dollars, as long as you understand how to get there.
Very nice points you mentioned. I have a question I wanted to ask a bit later, but I think now it fits well because talking about your different experiences that you mentioned, do you have a mentor or a role model that you look? Of course, I think a lot of people have that. Like I'm talking about the big business people that are get maybe special training or follow a certain person or just read someone, like some person's books. What about you? Do you have a certain person in your career or in your life that you think that person, or maybe more than one, is really my mentor?
Yeah. I I can't say that I have a mentor, um, but I can say that I have had multiple people who have mentored me at certain points of my career. Um, Going back, this is going to sound cliched, but going back to when I was a child, obviously my father was a big inspiration for me. He ran two or three businesses on the side. He had side hustles before there was a word for side hustles, right? And I think lots of Circassians come from this background. And honestly, I don't know whether this is, and I think this is universal in every place where Circassians can be found. This is not unique to the United States. I don't know whether this is something of the Circassian spirit. I don't know if this is a function of us being a little stubborn. I don't know if this is a function of us being immigrants in many of the places where we come to, but I do believe that entrepreneurship massively over indexes within the Circassian communities worldwide. If you look at the average percent of people who are entrepreneurs in the US, in Jordan, in Syria, in Russia, in Turkey, in the EU, and you compare that to the percentage of Circassians who are self-employed or have a side hustle, I think we're 10 to 1 in terms of how much more we are represented within entrepreneurship. So I think the first thing is, as a child, I remember being in high school, being in college and saying, I want to run my own business one day. And my American friends would say to me, oh, that's such an aspiration. That's so hard. That's so difficult. And I'm not denying it's hard or difficult, but when half my relatives are entrepreneurs, it felt normal to me. You know, it felt like half the people I know do this. Why can I not also do this? So I think that is, and I think a lot of our watchers, viewers, listeners right now, they probably have a very similar background. So I think that was the first part for me. Having said that, again, this is perhaps a little unique to the United States. You know, Circassians historically have not always valued education. As we have come into the modern Western world, I think that we've understood that education is a valuable resource. It's a modern weapon, peaceful weapon for us to fight and compete and succeed for success. So I think, you know, everyone in my family always said, go get an education. But because many people in my family were not fortunate enough to have an education, the advice stopped there to a certain extent. So, okay, I have it. No one ever said, you get your diploma and there's a job waiting for you. No one ever said that. But I think that was what was implied, because no one had ever gotten to that level of the video game. You know, you beat the boss and then what? So
Yeah.
I did struggle. I struggled tremendously early in my career because I did not have mentors. I did not have anybody who I trusted who could give me advice. And it was very hard to find, you know, people in my career path who would say, hey, let me take you under my wing. I did find a few, but as a result of that, I just voraciously started consuming as much content as I could. I read books. There was no YouTube back then. There were no podcasts back then. So I read every book that anybody who was smart who mentioned a book, I would go and read it. I was reading a book a week at a certain point, and that's when I realized I just want to go get my MBA. And again, in keeping with always trying to go to the best I could get into, I went to one of the best schools in the world, New York University, NYU, the Leonard Stern School of Business. And then once I really got into management consulting and working with Fortune 500s, then yes, I was surrounded by people where there were a few people who mentored me at certain stages of my career, but I would just always look at the most successful people that I could find, and I would model their behavior. Whether they said something to me, there were people I never spoke to, but I always heard them talking about, I try to read a book a week, a book a month. I would always see them preparing for a meeting by going over their notes, ending the meeting 5 minutes early so they could summarize their notes. And I would just model their good behavior as best I could. Where I am now in my career, I don't want to say I know everything because I don't, but there's a certain level where mentorship is less helpful than just you as an individual laying out goals to yourself and learning and being very self-aware about what you're good at and what you're not good at, and then trying to build a peer group where other people are doing the same thing. So it's at this point, it's less about somebody showing me the ropes or tell me what I can do, and more about me having a peer group for us. And this is what I did this morning here in Chicago. downtown Chicago. It's another business owner. He said, these are the three things I'm trying to do with one of my businesses this year. I said, these are the three things I'm trying to do with my business this year. And we just sort of traded notes with each other.
Nice. You didn't talk yet about Optilingo. I would like. I'm not sure if you're like timeline wise, did we reach Optilingo or not yet?
Kind of. So what happened with Optilingo, we sold that. So that first company that I was recruited by a private equity firm and moved to Chicago to grow and sell, we sold it. We all did well. And I took a portion of my proceeds from that business and I invested them into building what is now Optilingo. Optilingo is a language learning software platform. And really, for Optilingo would not be possible today without the nonprofit organization that I run called the Pshehape Foundation, which started 12 years ago. So these are related, but it's worth me just talking about this for a minute. The way that I got into teaching Circassian was I wanted to speak Circassian, and I could never find resources that were accessible to me to learn the Circassian language. So about 12, 13 years ago, Google Books was first established. And I said, oh, this is wonderful. Let me take all of these books that I've collected and send them to Google Books to be scanned so people can find them. And Google Books came back to me and said, we cannot accept these books because you're not the copyright holder. And I said, well, the copyright holder, either the Soviet Union collapsed or there was a guy in Turkey who's no longer with us, or a guy in Syria or Jordan who passed away. And, people in the local community, they would give me all of these books, and many of them are great books. And Google said, no, you're not the copyright holder. So I started the Pshehape Foundation, and then I started creating, and everything on the Pshehape Foundation is available free. So I started creating my own resources to get around this. And the Pshehape Foundation is really just created to make copyright ownership free to the masses. So I started doing all this stuff, and I contribute a lot of my own money into the Pshehape Foundation every year. I don't take donations from anyone. It's not a membership organization. I do not accept outside funding. But I put enough money into that organization every year to buy a small Mercedes. That's how much I put into this. For any of you who have seen the Aslan, the little Aslan series that's on YouTube, I could have bought a small house with the amount of money that went into that project. Right? I really, really believe passionately in this work. So, what I thought was, hey, I learned something about how to learn languages. I learned something about how to teach languages. Can I commercialize what I know? And so really, Optilingo is the commercialization of over a decade of research and development in how to learn languages, how to teach languages, and the content that facilitates both. And Optilingo has 20 different languages on the platform, one of which is Circassian, 19 of which are what I call commercial languages: Spanish, Italian, French, German, Swedish, Korean, Arabic, Chinese, all these things. And really the inspiration here, and again, this is something I don't talk about a lot. The inspiration here is, in the United States, there is a CASA called the Circassian Benevolent Association. My family is largely considered to be a pivotal force in creating the CASA as we know it today. I think a lot of people would agree with that. I'm not saying the only, but as an example, there was an election a few years ago where people said, "Oh, here was me during construction of the mosque. Here was me during construction of the Sunday school." And people said, "Jonty, why are you not running for president?" And I said, "I don't want to." But what I noticed is in every single one of those pictures that people were posting, in 90% of them, I was in the pictures. And the reason for this is my mother, my father, my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, they were all so engaged, along with many, many other community members, by the way. They were also engaged in building the CASA, physically doing the construction of the CASA. There was no one to babysit me, right? So I was always there. And one of the things that my uncles and my grandfathers always said to me is that in the United States, the CASA in the United States is a little unique in the world in that we have a masjid and a CASA both in one building. And the reason for that is not just my uncles and my grandfathers, but the community understood, being such a small community in the United States, we would not be able to survive without being part of a larger community. And for us, that was the Islamic community. And that was what put this idea in my head as a 6-year-old, which now evolved into the idea in my head as a middle-aged guy, which is that we need a way to subsidize what we do with Circassian affairs. And so with Optalingo, what really is, if I've invested a significant amount of money, of my own money, to build what is currently Optalingo. I'm talking 6 figures, mid 6 figures. If that was just for Circassian, I would never do it. As much as I love our language, it would be catastrophically fatal for me from a financial profession. But because we have 19 other commercial languages, the revenue from those languages comes in to subsidize the efforts that I do with the Circassian language. And so this is what's really interesting. Without the Nassib Foundation, Optalingo would not exist because the content, the thought leadership, the intellectual property would not be there. But without Optalingo, which is a consumer grade, high quality product, my work at the Nassib Foundation would not be as high quality as it is. And anybody who has attended any of my Circassian lessons will see that I always strive to have a commercial level of quality in everything that I do. So that's the relationship that's how Optalingo came to exist.
This topic is very common, very known for Circassians from generation to generation. They were always saying, like parents or like Hamada and all elder tells a young person that, no, don't talk about money. You don't have to ask for money. Even people, I've seen young people, for example, even nowadays, like they do a service and then they're shy to ask for their right, which is the amount of money that they should take. Like you're talking about a logo, you're talking about even a paint job, any kind of service they're doing. And there is this, I don't know if you call it a saying or maybe it became like even a culture that they're saying, yamuk, it's like, it's not very nice to ask for money. Do you also believe, because my personal opinion on this is that time is really different now. As you mentioned, if you can't fund yourself, if you can't fund yourself to go to have enough time to help Circassians and do a lot of activities, then you will stop eventually. And so do you agree on this? What do you think about this topic?
Yeah. Here, I really want to show some love and respect to a young man. Well, he's my age. I don't know if I'm a young man. He's a year or two younger than me, whom I respect a lot. I haven't had a chance to speak to him in a while, but I grew up with him in New Jersey. And his name is Jabal Abadou. And Jabal, in an interview a few years ago, he said something that I think was very profound. He said it as a short comment, but I think it was the amount of time he spent saying it is not equal to the amount of weight that I think we should all have this in. And what he said was, before any one of us can try to do something for our nation, we must do something for ourselves. So first, go make sure your family has food on the table. Make sure you have money in the bank to pay for your bills. Make sure that there's no financial pressure that you are facing, that your family is facing. And then once you are financially stable and you have extra money and extra time, then start thinking about how you can take the extra money and extra time to do something for your nation. Otherwise, you're not sustainable. You will burn out. And I think that part of the challenge we have within our nation is we always see I've been doing what I'm doing for 15 years. I don't know many people who have been doing the same thing for 15 years, right? Without getting paid for it. And the reason is I followed this advice. We all see somebody who gets really excited and then 6 months later, they're gone. And that, I think, it builds cynicism within our community. Oh, this guy woke up yesterday and discovered he's Circassian. He'll be gone in 6 months. And a lot of the time they are, I'm sorry to say. So I think that's the first comment that I would make on this topic. The next comment is, I do think that there is a difference between doing your job and getting paid and doing something that's Pshehape or Pshehape. For example, if you are a professional babysitter and you babysit people and that's what you do, you should charge money to babysit children. If somebody says, "Hey, you're my relative or you're somebody who knows me, can you watch my child because we're related?" That's Pshehape. That's Pshehape. That's not your business. So I think that we need to separate these two. Where it gets a little weird is when, let's say that you are a professional babysitter and this is what you do. And then your relative says, "Can you watch my baby?" Well, if you're a professional doctor and you've spent a lot of time to be educated as a doctor, if a relative says at dinner, "Hey, this hurts, can you take a look at it?" Yeah, you'll spend 30 seconds to look at it. But if that person then says, "I need a heart transplant," which is a very, very expensive procedure, can you do it for free? No one would ask for that. Very few people would ask for that. So I think that we need to separate this idea of Pshehape and Pshehape from this idea of doing your job. And I also think that we in this new generation where we are educated, we are exposed to modern Western, not just Western, but just modern ideas. We need to lead by example. So one of the things that I do personally, whenever I engage anyone through a circadian, the first thing that I say to them is, I would like you to do something, and this is a paid project. If it is a paid project, sometimes I ask for volunteers, but I'm very upfront, proactively about this. I'm a little older, so I feel like as a sort of a kamada in my social network, it's incumbent upon me to set a role here, to be a role model. And so whenever I reach out to somebody, I say, "I have a project. It's a paid project. I'm insisting on paying you. I want to pay you as a professional what your market rate is. I do not want a discount. I will not accept a discount. If you want to do a really good job or you want to do something that's Pshehape or Pshehape, just give me your highest quality." And I tell people point blank, I will not accept a discount. I will not accept anybody saying, "No, this is for good deeds" or whatever, because the response that I give them is, I want a professional job and I want to pay somebody to be professional to do that job. And if you're not going to take my money, I will give it to somebody else who's not doing it. Now, on the flip side of that, if I do need volunteer work, I will reach out to people and say, "I'm looking for volunteers, but I also scope out what I'm looking for." Because here's the other problem. So we talked about the business side. Now we're talking about the Pshehape side. Somebody says to you, "Hey, Blan, I need help. I need a volunteer." Okay. What do you need me to do? How often do you need me to do it? How much of my time is this going to take? Is the skill that you're looking for one that I have? Right. So whenever I reach out for volunteer work, first of all, I'm very, very clear. This is volunteer work. I need somebody to help with audio production. I need somebody to help with video production. I need somebody to help with translation work. This will take approximately 1 to 2 hours a week for a month. It'll take 12 hours for 2 weeks. I'm very, very clear and upfront about that, because even if we're doing something that is Pshehape or a nonprofit, you should still treat it as a professional effort. Otherwise, I'm not going to use this word in English because it's a dirty word. It's a bad word, but apaterach. Sorry, apaterach. Apaterach is about the queer from the chapter.
Arash, great. Of course, I am just want to mention that with the content that you're telling us, I'm also making like notes, because as I said, that the benefit, that the aim is that young people, or maybe also elders, doesn't matter, benefit from this. So I'm just making few points that I will share later on as a comment under this video. I guess because I've seen, I remember you went to Nalchik before Corona, and I was following your short videos, stories, as they mentioned in Instagram, in the Instagram world. And you talked once, I saw you waking up very early, and you were walking outside. I believe that's, if I'm not mistaken, or it was in Nalchik, or after you came back to your hometown, and you talked about waking up early, and as a person, that's why you were doing it. Can you maybe, I'm trying to shift a bit to the
Routine.
healthy habits. that you have?
Yeah. So first of all, it's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. My wife tells me, my good friends tell me, my good colleagues tell me, a lot of people tell me that I am one of the most productive people that they know in terms of getting things done. But I myself always feel like I could do a better job with time management. I can do a better job with efficiency. So in as much as people tell me that they think that I have very solid routines and very good time management, I still think there's lots of room for improvement, right? So um, I don't want anybody to think there's a secret formula out there and that, if you follow it, you will be successful because again, everyone's different. The other thing is that I think that routines can vary and they can change. And the last thing is we're not robots. So they can change, they should change. Certain times of the year, you're traveling, it's winter, it's summer, that kind of thing. At that time, I was waking up at 5 a.m. Every day, 7 days a week. I was waking up at 5 a.m. and I would start my day with a morning walk. I would then come back into the house and I would study Circassian for 30 minutes. I would study Russian for 30 minutes. And then I would have breakfast and take a shower, have breakfast, have a cup of coffee, and then start my day. Um, I'm still refining my optimal routine. Right now, I wake up at about 7 in the morning and I go to bed at 11 o'clock to midnight at night. And that for me is working better, in part because I have children, in part because one of the things I am trying to do is go to sleep and wake up the same time every day. And it's more flexible to go to bed around 11 or midnight and wake up at 7, because then you're getting your 7 or 8 hours of sleep. And if you want to hang out with friends on a Friday or a Saturday night, or you have to do homework on a Monday or Tuesday night with your children, that schedule works, right? So that's what I've done in the past. I just to put all my cards on the table, I have my full-time job that I described with this insurance company. I run Optolingo into the software company. I have a real estate development firm. I have a small other insurance company that I run on the side as well. And then I teach Circassian classes and I create the materials for those classes. And I have 4 children, 2 of whom are adult teenagers, 2 of whom are still in school. So I am trying to do, and I'm still continuing to learn and improve my Circassian, to learn and improve my Russian as well. So there's a lot of things that I'm doing, and it's always a little bit of a struggle. At the end of January, I'm going to be traveling for 2 solid weeks. And so how am I going to be able to keep up all of these things when I'm in 4 different states during 2 different weeks? I think that the key is not what is your routine. I think the key is, do you have a routine? And I think for a lot of people in the post-COVID environment, where it's hybrid working, remote working, people switching jobs, I said this yesterday at an event that I was attending. God forbid one of us is in a car accident and we get hit by a car and we have to go through physical therapy to learn how to walk again. God forbid that happens. To a certain extent, I feel like with routine and schedule, that's what I'm going through right now, because new job, hybrid work environment. I have 2 more businesses that I didn't have a few years ago. My children are in second grade and in kindergarten. They have homework now. They have activities. And so trying to balance all of these things, it's a new way of me living my life. So I think when it comes to routines, the best advice I can give is try to develop one and be flexible and forgiving to yourself, because we're not machines, we're not robots. We need that flexibility. That's the best advice I can give.
Great. Um, I also had a question about, I just wondering if, uh, we saw what happened in the Corona crisis. I believe that a lot of experts are also saying we are probably going to have some kind of a crisis this year as well. The prices are very high, inflation. Lots of countries are not doing well. Economy is hard. So where Circassians live as well, I can tell you, for example, in Turkey, it's not easy. In Jordan, it's not easy. In Syria, of course, after the war, it's not easy at all. Um, the topic of passive income. I believe you have different kinds of passive income. Like, for example, I'm not sure, apartment here, or what do you think about this topic? Do you think it's important to have a passive income? Because I noticed that when I talk about it with people like them, actually, yeah, no one really thinks about it that much, and the time passes very, very quickly. So, about passive income, what do you think about that?
So I have two things to say about this. First, I do think that there is, especially in the economic environment that we live in today, which is in part a function of opportunity and in part a function of necessity. I think that it is very wise to have multiple income streams. Okay. So whether that means you have a full-time job and a part-time job, you have two businesses, as long as you can do them, as long as you have the time, the energy to focus, the detail, the attention to detail to do them and to do them well. Okay. So I do think that it is wise to have, at least two income streams. Now, having said that, I take issue a little bit with the term, and it's not a term you invented. I get it. It's a term everybody uses. I take issue with the term of passive income because passive income would imply that you sit on your butt and you make money, and that's not the truth. And I think that there are a lot of internet swindlers and hustlers and charlatans who try to sell you a course for lots of money to sell you a dream on something that is absolutely impossible. And that's called passive income. Passive income, I don't like this term. So let me just first relabel this term. First, it's important to understand what is the concept that is real, that is absolutely real, that people mistake passive income for. So there's two ways that somebody can make money. You can trade your time for money, or you can trade value for money. Okay. So you can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be a plumber, you can be a garbage man. It doesn't matter. And some of these people are highly skilled and some of these people are less highly skilled, right? But the fact is, I'm using this as an example to show whether you have moderate or high levels of education or whether you can charge moderate or high levels of dollars. Okay. These are all trading dollars for time. Okay. I'm a brain surgeon. I'm going to be compensated for the amount of time it takes me to do a brain surgery. I'm a carpenter or a plumber. I'm going to be compensated for the amount of time that it takes me to do these things. If I work at Starbucks, I'm being paid per time. Okay. So whether you're an entrepreneur or you work for somebody, you're being paid per time. That is how most people start their careers. Okay. That's now when we talk about passive income, this misterm, what we're really talking about is breaking free of the cycle of trading time for money and trading value for money instead. Okay, so whether that is building intellectual property or building an asset. So in my case, Optolingo, it's not passive because I spent a lot of time and money to build it, and I continue to invest time and money to build it. But the fact is, I have intellectual property here, and so Circasian is free on the platform. It's 100% free. There's no cost for Circasian on the platform. But for the other 19 languages, there is a subscription. Okay. So because there is a subscription, whether somebody is buying it at 2 o'clock in the morning or 1 p.m. in the afternoon, whether I'm working or I'm not working, there is a opportunity for revenue to flow in. I own a few apartment buildings here in Chicago. Whether I'm working or I'm not working, right? There is rental income that's coming in from those buildings. Okay. So what I've been able to do is create value, either an asset, a physical asset called an apartment building, or I created a intellectual property asset called a software platform. And so I'm still working. It's not like, the other day we had a snowstorm here and we had a leak in the roof and I had to get that repaired in one of my apartment buildings. I'm still working, but I have broken out of this paradigm of trading my time for a set number of dollars, right? I have created something of value. And so I do think that it is valuable. It is something we should all strive to do, to build something of value that people will trade economic value for. And that's what people call passive income. But the amount of time and effort and sometimes money it takes to build that thing of value, and then the amount of time and effort that it takes to manage that thing of value to make sure that it grows and does not fall apart. That's why I take a little bit of issue with this concept of passive income.
Understood. Um, of course, this is not a lot of people, especially nowadays, are shifting careers. Some even have, during the Corona crisis, I'm talking about people like working in the field of restaurants, cafes. They had really hard times, and then some companies, as I said, also had to close or had to downsize. So there, a moment comes where the person says, you know what, I'm going to change my career, or I'm going to do something else. And I've talking a lot about this topic with circassians, and still, that's why I feel that we need to educate people that, you know what, you have to invest in yourself. You have to follow courses. You have to seek guidance, but you have to find a path. You have to find something to do that maybe you like, or maybe it works at the country where you're living. In this topic particular, what's your advice for someone that has some skills but is like really thinking, shall I study? Shall I do masters? Shall I do a second masters? Shall I start a business? I see a lot of young people that are struggling with that, to be honest.
Mhm.
And I would like, maybe if we can give them that advice. Maybe it's not easy to generalize and to give advice in this kind of concept, but still, what advice do you have for someone that is struggling to find the right kind of business?
Yeah. So going back to a comment that I made in response to a question that you asked me a while ago, one of the people at a certain point in my career who provided me with mentorship, he said to me something that I'll share with you now. He said, in your career, don't follow the money, follow the skill. Okay. So, what he meant was, don't chase the job that's going to give you the most money there, because money's going to come and go. Chase the job that's going to give you access to the smartest person with the best skills that you can identify. Okay, so that's the first piece of advice I can give. The second piece of advice I can give is, as you're developing that skill, think about where and how you can leverage that skill, even as you're entering a new career. So, for example, let's say you're working at a cafe. Okay, some people might say that's a very hard job. You're dealing with customers all the time. You might be serving coffee. You might be serving meals. You might be cleaning tables. You might be working as a cashier. This is a very challenging job, right? And it's a very honest job. It's a very admirable job. It is good to do this job, right? But I think we would all agree this is not where people want to end their career. And this is where many people begin their career, right? So, having said that, you should look around in that cafe, coffee shop, the restaurant that you're working and say, what can I learn here? Look at things, look at the smartest person you can find there and ask them as many questions as you can. That's number one. Number two, look at all the things that frustrate you about that job and ask yourself, why are these things frustrating to me? And how might I be able to fix them? So, for example, let's just say that you work at a restaurant or a cafe, some of these places where there's always too long of a line. Well, that means that there's not a good operating model to make sure that either there's enough staff there, or to make sure that the way that staff was deployed, it is not optimal for servicing the volume of customers that are coming in the door. You might think about that. You might hypothesize about that. You might ask a smart person who works there about that. But if you go deep enough into that, you might then find a book and realize that this is actually a concept called queuing and operations management. And the thing that I just described can be used for people who are designing factories that build cars. The thing that I just described, there's a whole operations management course that I took when I was in business school that dealt with how Disney was able to optimize the way that they manage lines and fees to increase the revenue in their parks by 30%. It's the same concept. So think about what it is seeing and try to figure out, is there a way to use a skill and if you transition your career, can you take something that you know and take it into a completely different area, even if it doesn't feel like that area is as similar as you might think? And again, what I just described, being able to take that, working in a cafe and leverage it to go work at Disneyland or to leverage it to design a factory, that's as far apart as somebody might think, but it's actually the same concept. It's operations management and queue management.
Great. So, um, if you would summarize these tips that you're giving, as I've learned from my within my career, I gave lots of presentations and trainings as well, and I always learn something from other people. That if you want people to remember something, mention it. Like if you mention it in the beginning, for example, or the middle, also summarize it in the end because it's very important to keep in their mind. What would you summarize? Because you're a busy person. There's also a Sunday, a weekend, or such a. I guess it's for you. It's already you already have
1 p.m. Yeah.
Yeah, but what would you summarize? What would you like to say for the Circassian youth?
Yeah.
Jonty mentioned.
It doesn't matter where you start your career. It doesn't matter. You might be in one country or another country. You might have access to a blue collar job or a white collar job. It doesn't matter where you start. What matters is what you do once you have started. And if you are halfway into your career or at the beginning part of your career, it also doesn't matter. Okay. The most important thing is that you are always looking for the smartest people that you can be around and that you are trying to learn and teach yourself as much as possible. Right. So the first thing is go to the smartest people you can find, go to the smartest company you can find, and try to suck as much knowledge out of those people, whether it's by observing them or by asking them questions. Okay, that's the first piece of advice I can give. The second piece of advice I can give is we live in an information age, and whether you are reading books, watching videos, listening to podcasts, participating in events like this one, go get as much knowledge as you can. That's the second piece of advice. The third one is follow the skills, not the money, right? So always look for the opportunity that's going to give you the best ability to build your skills, as opposed to the most amount of dollars or lira or rubles or euros that you can get today. And then the final piece of advice, these are words that I live by. Do what you say what you do, show up on time, add value, be tired. If you do those things, I guarantee you will be successful. You will be wildly successful because very few people do those things. Say what you do. Tell people what you're going to do. Do what you say. Actually do it. I hate to say it, but within our Circassian community, 50% of people fail to do that. Show up on time. 50% of our people fail to do that. Try to add value. Don't just do your job. Go above and beyond. Not because somebody's paying you, but because that's how you want to operate as a professional. And then finally, be kind. Whether it's somebody senior to you or somebody junior to you, you never know where somebody may end up. Just always be kind. That's the best advice I can give.
Great. I would like to just to wrap up. It's something we didn't talk about, but the language. I've seen a lot of young people. Not all countries give English language an importance. Even here in Europe, to be honest, I've talked to young people that study English, but TV is in, for example, German or in Dutch or in French. Um, do you agree that English language, I wouldn't say a must, but it's very, very important to learn and to develop?
Yes, yes. And I'm not saying this because I live in the United States. When I was in high school, we actually had a class called typing because the internet was not a thing back then. And everyone said to us, in the future, technology is going to become very important. And so it's important to learn how to type, how to use the computer, so on and so forth. Today, there are many people who can get an okay job not using a computer, not using technology. But I think we would all agree that the highest paying jobs that are not going to break your back through physical labor that you can do when you're 60 and 70 years old, if you choose to work that long, they're all going to be related to technology, right? Whether you are a doctor using a computer to take notes, or whether you are a computer programmer, or whether you are an accountant who uses accounting software to file taxes, I think the majority of people would agree that it is almost impossible to earn a comfortable, financially lucrative life without using technology. Even if you're a social media star who's not using a computer, you're still using technology. Okay.
Sure.
So I think in that same vein, many people would agree that it is easier than not to advance your professional career if you speak English, to read English, write English, whether that means that you are able to work for an international company, because even if you're an international company, if the EU, even after the UK left the EU, the EU still said English will be their primary language of communication because it's just easier, right? So whether it's because you're using English as a medium of expression to work for large multinational companies, which know a lot and can teach a lot, or whether you are using English to consume all of the information that I just described, how many business books are written in English as opposed to other languages? I'm sure there are great business books coming out of the Middle East and Russia and Turkey and every place where Circassian people live. There are many, many smart and gifted people there. But I think I would bet money, and I'm not a gambler, but I would bet money that there are more English language books and podcasts and videos when it comes to business and professional standard than any other language. And by the way, if you aspire to go to get an MBA, a master's in business administration, I'm pretty sure 99% of them are in English, even if they are in the EU or other countries around the world. So I would say that English as a language is a tool. It's an instrument that can help somebody become more successful. I'm sure there are many successful people who don't have this tool or instruments, but if you have it, it's going to help.
Great. I honestly enjoyed talking with you, Jonty. I would love to sit really in Starbucks, in that Starbucks that we're sitting, or maybe here if you come to the Netherlands, and to have a cup. I don't know what you drink usually. I drink latte macchiato, sometimes cappuccino, and to enjoy a nice talk, not only about business but also about our community. I really enjoyed it.
It's been my pleasure, Glenn.
And I think it's good to wrap up and at the end and saying few words in Circassian uh, for the Circassian speakers, but to also motivate the youth that Circassian language is very essential for our nation.
Arashi adigabzer sipjusas amr. Adigabzer pshapas. Okay, mahanashko di up adigabzer. Sashan tapsha datkan adziv, the guprushus productory zipstor, ana yaas, ad yaas. Okay, ana yaas, ad yaas, din gor yaas, shavza gor yaas, dir yaas, zar yaas. Okay, ويانا وبستنما ويانا وبستنما ستكو da bzamsa urimapsatama yamux aspa arasi wibzamsa umapsatama ari sasitesha yamux. We all have a mother, we all have a father, we all have family, we all have a religion, we all have some culture, some standards. This is part of what makes us who we are. We also all have a language. It's a shame if we don't speak that language. It is the same as not speaking to your mother, as not speaking to your father. Language is another central force in our lives. And if we ignore it, it's like ignoring your mother, father, your brothers, your sisters. That's my opinion on that subject.
So to Dr. Jabat, you said it very nicely. Jonty, um, we today we spoke for 1 hour plus, like 10 or 11 minutes. I really would like to thank you for all the information you provided. As I mentioned again, I mentioned it. You are really person that's helping a lot of certifications, the certification nation, the certification language. I believe I can say subcommunity جا تحمل absorbs on certification online. I would like to say thank you on behalf of the certification.
Tell me about the social push.
I think we will end up today this interview. As I said before, I did my notes. I will also listen again to not to miss any important information, because it can be that some people won't understand everything what we talked about today, spoken about English language, of course. I'm gonna just write it as text, and then they can translate it to Turkish, to Arabic, to which language, to Russian, and then read and learn from it. And that's the goal from this. Anything else you would like to add before we end the interview?
Just thank you, Black, for setting this up. You are doing a great job for our community as well. The fact that you've committed to hosting this series and proactively reaching out to Circassians who can provide some level of support and inspiration and guidance to our youth. Thank you for the work that you're doing as well.
Shiguapash.
Sarisi Guapas.
And we'll keep, of course, me and Janti, we talk, we are always in contact. Fidja, salam wizok, we ونعاوم بسلام سلام سويخش. Greetings to your side of the world.
Thank you very much. Sarisi Nams Wikish.
وعليكم السلام وزنشوف.
What it was in